Thank you for the invite, Sean. Pleased to be here and glad to be in Humboldt County for the second time this month. It's a fantastic opportunity to come back up again. All right, so I'm going to be talking about valuing distributed energy resources at SMUD. And if there's a little time at the end, maybe a little bit on our electrification programs, and maybe Scott will help me do that if we get to it. So starting off, I just wanted to level set on SMUD and our business structure. We are governed by a board of 7 directors that sets kind of our strategic direction for the organization. And I've put their vision up here, which is SMUD's vision is to be the trusted partner with our customers and community, providing innovative solutions to ensure energy affordability and reliability, improve the environment, and reduce our region's carbon footprint. And sorry, that's cut off there at the bottom. And enhance the vitality of our community. Thank you, Sean. So these are 7 folks that are more or less regular people. They're not energy experts. They're maybe a step up from the man in the street type of person you would interview, but by no means energy experts, but this is kind of the vision that they've set for the organization. We've had really consistent positive leadership from our board over the last several decades on addressing climate change. And I'll just talk a little bit about direction they're headed, which is setting some of the direction for us around electrification. So really for us, this is about reducing our greenhouse gas emissions and our region's greenhouse gas emissions at the fastest pace and lowest possible cost to help provide the most economic benefit for our community. Our board right now, as part of our integrated resource plan, they've just published, we've just published a document for an upcoming board meeting next week that's looking at a net zero carbon target for SMUD for 2040, which would be accomplished by accelerating building and vehicle electrification even faster than the sort of perceived state targets as we see them. So thinking a little bit about how distributed energy resources can help us kind of activate that market for decarbonization. One of the things that we found early on with our electric vehicle adoption is that about 30% of the folks that were buying EVs already had rooftop solar. And so thinking about distributed energy resources, one of the things that we know that they can do is really help people start to understand their role in the energy system a little bit more and start to think about other ways that they can have a bigger impact than just adopting rooftop solar. We are expecting that our PV customers are going to be some of the first adopters of electrification technologies. This will help them make better use of their solar investments, help them save more money, and help them have an even bigger impact on the environment than their solar investment alone. But by itself, that's really not going to get us fully to where we need to get to. There's only about 1% of our customer base who are adopting solar PV per year, and the market potential is we expect to be limited to about 30% of our overall single-family home base. And what we really need is about 10,000 customers per year electrifying their homes. We need to get from 1,500 per year to up to 50,000 per year electric vehicle adoption. So just looking to this sort of PV effect to catalyze this new market is not going to be enough on its own. We are looking at our new construction program as a way to kind of develop a new ideal and a new sort of picture in people's mind of what they would like to have if they can afford a new home. So, not just granite countertops, not just net zero electricity, but really reaching for, in our market, about 4,000 new homes per year. Can we make those all zero carbon? Can we make them all high performance? Right now, Scott Blunk on my team has been working with our new construction program to create a bundle of high efficiency, all electric, EV ready, powered by community solar and accompanied by either on-site batteries or community batteries. That program is in the design phase, but we're expecting to have that fully rolled out with that combination later this fall. Right now, we do have the all-electric version of that. We've got our first builder now, D.R. Horton, is going to be building 80 homes with a bunch of these components in it later this year. Oh, great. Sorry about that, Tom. And for the rest of the folks on Zoom.
We it be possible to stand to your right because you're
Yep. Sure thing. We'll just get cozy with the piano here. Is that better? Okay.
You can play the piano.
I am taking lessons with my kids. So one of the things that we really need to keep a focus on, though, is making sure that DERs are keeping our new costs down, our new system costs down, but also making sure that they're not shifting too much in the way of existing costs to those who can't afford it. For some rough numbers to think about, our incremental system capacity investments are surprisingly small for me. I was expecting they would be bigger than this, but we invest about 2 to 3% of our annual budget in capacity expansion. A big chunk of that is serving those that growth of 4,000 new homes per year. We've got about a $1.5 billion annual budget, just for some figures for you. And some of that capacity expansion is actually needed to serve new developments, so actually running wires out to those new developments to provide them electricity when the sun is not available or storage would not be able to serve their loads. Some of this, though, we believe could be able to be deferred with appropriate planning and or avoided altogether with the right signals to customers. And so one of the things that we're working on to try to do that is really getting better at predicting which customers are likely to adopt different distributed energy resources. This is really important. If you think down at the feeder level, we might have 1,000 to 3,000 customers served on a single feeder. So really understanding very finely over the next couple of years, how many of those customers are going to adopt PV, how many are going to adopt storage? Are they going to participate in a program with us that gives us high enough confidence that those devices will be operating on peak and actually can defer an investment in that asset? These are really important questions that our grid planning folks are on the hook for from a reliability standpoint, so they need to have confidence in our ability to predict and also confidence in those operational outcomes. So we're building right now a software tool that starts from understanding our customer, understanding their propensity for adoption of DER in terms of the economic payback and the type of customer they are, whether they value the environment, those kinds of things, and using that to predict very granularly which customers will adopt. The key challenge for us here is that the per unit wires cost are actually a lot smaller than I was expecting as well. They're in the $100 to $300 per kilowatt peak. So really as we've looked at different ways to pilot this, we're really having to figure out for deferral how we leverage organic adoption as much as possible and not look at just a straight up procurement of distributed resources where we might pay 2 or 3x what we might pay for a wires alternative just to demonstrate it. This is really how do we predict who's going to adopt based on our existing rate structure and plan that accordingly as a equivalent to a grid side investment.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but can you explain a little bit, 100, 300 kilo, what is the wires cost?
That's like if we were to build a new transformer at a substation or do a reconductoring or even a new substation might be on the high end of that cost range. So that's per kilowatt of peak demand that might be demanded by a new subdivision or growth in an existing area. They are chunky investments, so DERs offer an opportunity to defer some of those really chunky investments, but finding the right area of our system that's growing at the right pace for our DER growth can kind of match that is also another challenge.
Put out there. I've already asked them to stop with the chainsaw activity. That will stop soonish. But we badly need SMUD to help get commercial two-stroke engines, which are dirtier than cars. Like the electrified, he was just saying I would do this. His former classmate is running it up there. So he doesn't have access to electric commercial landscaping equipment, which he wants.
Okay. I'll take that back to SMUD. I don't think it's going to help you here in Arcata, but we did used to have a free electric lawnmower giveaway, so maybe we can bring that back, focus on commercial. So one of the key things we're realizing is that our rate structure is really a tremendous driver for DER adoption. For PV, we're seeing about $100 to $150 million per year in investment in solar PV against our NEM rate. That's more than SMUD invests entirely in our RPS investments to meet our 50% per year, or 50% target by 2030. So really a tremendous rate signal that we're sending. That rate is already stacking a lot of that grid value into it. So thinking about how we transform those rates over time and make sure that we're not shifting too much of those costs to non-participants is really a key focus for us. We also see that supporting significant investment in energy efficiency, and we're just starting to see it support investment in battery storage in our service territory. And when we look at all of these investments together, it looks like we could see as much as a 1 to 2% per year reduction in our overall peak demand, which is really tremendous as we think about the role of our gas plants in the future and how we can actually phase those out and rely more on DERs. Is that a 10-minute? Okay, thank you. So thinking about what that cost shift looks like and the challenge we've got with our existing rate structure, today our bundled rate structure collects about 80% of our costs through a volumetric charge in dollars per kilowatt hour, but our volumetric costs are really closer to about 30 to 40% of our cost to serve. So we've got a lot of sort of embedded fixed costs, the built infrastructure that we have that we're right now recovering through those volumetric charges. For a PV customer on NEM over 20 years, this looks like about an investment by us of about $1,000 per kilowatt of nameplate PV and an incentive to that PV system. So we are providing incentives through that NEM rate. These are investments effectively being made by our other customers and helping customers adopt solar. And currently that looks like about $15 million per year to our non-participant customer base, which is about, I think, still 95% of our customers that are considered non-participants. So it's something that we have to keep some focus on and think about as storage is coming on and these other DERs are coming on. How do we think about paying for those and really capturing the value on peak that we need in order to defer those capital investments? But the good news is that we've got electric vehicle and building electrification, which if those grow at the pace that we think should way more than offset the PV challenge that we've got and could really limit sort of the negatives that we talk about when we think about our NEM rate, really give us a lot more flexibility in rate design and revenue recovery to mitigate those cost impacts to low-income customers. And if we can see those PV customers actually being the early investors and driving the building electrification market, I think that should really help in terms of thinking about a picture of PV coupled with building electrification as an ideal both for customers and for the utility. So that's something we're trying several pilots out around to try and understand what that connection is and whether or not that can serve, again, as that early catalyst for electrification. One of the key challenges, though, as we think about the electrification piece, is if we actually want to cap the gas pipelines, we need a much stronger focus on how we electrify low income than we've had for solar PV or electric vehicle. We can't have it be that the last 25 or 30% of the customers left on the gas pipeline are the ones that can least afford it. That's going to be unsustainable from a cost perspective. So we really need early and strong solutions around building electrification for low income. So one of the key things as well as we think about valuing DERs and kind of the role of different flexible loads is that battery storage costs are falling tremendously. These two lines reflect just a shift in 3 years of forecasting of how much the industry forecasts have come down. We're talking to battery storage manufacturers who say their battery forecast cost forecasts are outdated every single month. They're revising them downward. So it's really going to create a lot of change in our industry in terms of how we think about distributed resources. We see a scenario where battery storage could actually outcompete other distributed resources from a cost standpoint. So a lot of our work around demand response could be somewhat negatively impacted from battery storage in a sense, people opting for batteries instead of using flexible loads to try and achieve the peak demand reductions. But alternatively, we're we're trying to create a situation where battery storage could actually complement these other resources by creating an overall building energy management system that allows for flexible loads to complement the battery storage and sort of play with each other to get deeper overall impact. And we think this is really going to be necessary if we are going to shut down the gas generation that's serving about 50% of our customers' needs from an energy standpoint today. And then finally, as we think about becoming all electric, storage is really going to have to be looked at as a way to enhance overall system reliability as we have cars running into telephone poles and taking out sections of our grid. How do we leverage customer battery storage to actually bring that part of the grid back faster? As we have heat waves impacting transformers, how do we think about micro islanding parts of our grid? These are going to be actual, plausible scenarios out in the future if we can deploy battery storage close enough to loads for it to serve as that kind of asset. So that's really something that we need to be balancing as utilities, thinking about centralized versus these partnerships with our customers where we're leveraging their investments. Overall, I think from my perspective, the largest value, though, for distributed resources is going to be in democratization of the electricity supply, allowing people to actually have choices to directly address climate change. And this can work in markets even where policy lags. So outside of California, there are many markets where there's no interest in carbon reduction, but distributed resources are available and can be competitive against grid rates. I think that can help transform those regions into becoming more accepting of rational policies around climate change. But I guess the last point I want to make is if we're going to do that, we have to make sure that we're able to export sustainable policies to those states, ones that are thoughtful about the kind of incumbent industry or utility and the emergent, really disruptive technology, and thinking about how do we come up with policies that those two can work together and show a better model. So it looks like, is that a stop sign or a 5 minutes? Okay, question?
Tom Cabot asked, have you looked at the use of batteries to avoid the need for main panel upgrades to homes?
Yeah, so we are having dialogue about that internally right now. I think we're expecting, oh, sorry. That was a question online from Tom Cabot, and the question was, have we looked at batteries to avoid the need for main panel upgrades? And I would say yes, we are having internal dialogue about that right now. A number of, I think it was in the early 90s, there was a predominant shift to 200 amp panels, but prior to that, most homes were built with 125 or 100 amp panels. And so those homes would be candidates for a technology that could do that. You also have service drop lines, so even if the panel is rated at the right amperage, you need a service drop upgrade, which entails a utility cost as well. So there's certainly an opportunity for batteries to help alleviate those. And I have just a couple minutes left, so yeah, go ahead.
Have you looked at providing your own energy storage to meet peak rather than relying on customers?
Yeah, so right now as part of our IRP, we looked at both utility side storage and customer side storage. And really at this point, we don't see enough value for utility side storage to be economic to invest at scale. So we're predominantly investing in behind the meter business model evaluations, where we look at how we can achieve customer reliability objectives along with getting either peak or ramping out of those battery storage systems. So that's going to be the focus over the next 2 years or so. I think we're evaluating battery storage costs every year, trying to figure out when it makes sense to couple those in with our utility scale solar arrays and really accomplish some large scale shifting.
In the larger picture, have you thought about what to do about interseasonal storage and the mismatch in seasons between when renewable energy sources are producing and when customers are using that energy?
So part of that IRP and part of the reason the discussion was around net zero carbon is that right now it seems like we are going to have a shortfall in the wintertime during long stretches where we've got substantial fog in the valley. We're going to need to probably operate our gas plants for short periods of time. And I think that's a question I think Commissioner Picker has kind of raised of, do we need to get to absolute zero carbon, or can we get close to zero carbon in the electric sector and basically use gas plants to ride through sort of worst case scenarios? And I think that's a reasonable question for us to think about, the amount of storage you would need, or the other types of investments in, say, wave or offshore wind, and the transmission associated with those. Getting that last increment could be very, very expensive. So I think we need more creative thinking there. We don't see, say, bulk storage of underground hydrogen or power to gas as really being viable, sustainable alternatives, but those are talked about as ways to achieve seasonal storage. I would just say more thinking is needed there. So that time.
And, yeah, we are trying to make it good.
Do you see the green button and orange button data as useful in your residential level battery storage program, and is there development of a similar API for decentralized battery storage?
I think it could be useful. We've had discussion with the IOUs that have the green button connect, and have had sort of mixed response to the utilization and value to the customer. But we're just sort of implementing the green button functionality this year, and expect to be evaluating whether something like Green Button Connect could complement that. I would expect orange button will expand to a inclusion of battery storage at some point. We've talked about that with them, and they see that as kind of a phase 2 for their efforts.
With that, yeah, with that.